That's great. So, hello everyone. Welcome back to the stream. I am Kavalu Koparkar. I am
Cool.
MLH coach, and I will be here with you all weekend. And here with me is Scene from Kintone. Hey, Scene, would you like to introduce yourself and what we are going to see in today's workshop?
Yeah, cool. And thanks for letting me know in the chat. Ralphak, Santhanoshi29, Admerceration, thank you for letting me know. My name is Sean, actually. It's spelt like she,
Oh,
scene, I know.
okay.
Um,
So sorry for that.
it's whatever. And I work at a company called Saibozu in Japan. And so I'm actually broadcasting you from Tokyo right now. It's currently 10 p.m. I just got out of a drinking party with my boss, actually, and so it's gonna be a good time today. I do these kind of workshops from time to time, and I'm happy to be here with you at MLH today. Thank you for the opportunity. And we are going to be doing a sort of a more intro to JavaScript and kind of React and how to set up your web projects kind of project today. It's going to be connecting a React front end to a back end, and then the back end is going to connect to a web database. I think it's really important skills, and it's good to go over the basics. And if you're already kind of experienced with web development, then you can also learn some new things. We're going to be using Express JS today, very popular backend framework. So, yeah. Did I talk too much? Is that okay, Mr. Kai? Are we good?
Yep, we are good, and I think people have joined. So we are super cool to go. If you want to share your screen, we can get it up here.
All right. Yeah, let me try and share screen real quick, and we can get going there. You're gonna see the an infinite share screen for just a second, everybody. Yeah,
Yeah,
there we go. Hide that. Ooh, there we go. Cool.
is the screen visible to everyone?
Yep. We good?
Mm,
Yeah.
I think
I,
yes.
I
Yeah,
assume so.
perfect.
I think there is a time delay because when I asked people if our audio is clear, it took a couple seconds to reply in the chat.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
that's
think
okay.
it's like 5 seconds time delay.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's whatever.
that's understood. Yeah, yeah.
Alrighty, alrighty.
Great.
Okay. So it seems like we have a good amount of people, and I also understand that we are broadcasting to people all over the world tonight, right? Which is kind of cool. And so while it's 10 p.m. for me, for some of you, it's 8 in the morning. For some of you, it's after lunch. Some of you are at work maybe right now, and so you know, there's going to be different levels of participation. We're going to be doing a live code along today, and we're actually going to code out this back end and front ends together, right? But some people, you might be tired after getting off work. You might be like eating a bucket of chicken or something, right? As you kind of just casually listen, that's a okay. And it's a really great way to learn. Is if especially if you're just like starting programming, you're trying to break into the industry, is to watch tutorials and things like this once and then go back and actually code along the second time, right? And that's how I started out as a self-taught programmer. I've only been in this industry for, well, I say only, it's been 5 years now, right? But I didn't study programming in college or anything like that. And I now work at a very, very large company here in Japan that sells a product called Kintone. So you can do it too. It's very, very possible. And so we're going to go over this live JavaScript stuff and kind of work on that coding grind. All right. Um, by sharing my screen though, like this, actually, I can't really see the chat unless I like switch over here. So yeah, yeah. That's so. If I actually, Mr. Kai, if you could just interrupt me if there's any like, questions or anything in the chat too. I do like to talk to people. And if you talk to me in chat, then I will respond. The streamer will say your name on the stream. Isn't that cool? Right? All right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If there is any question or any suggestions or anything like that, I will let you know. I will just hop on stage,
All right.
let you know something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. Or anyway, we are going to have Q&A at the end where we will go through all the questions from start. So
Yeah. Yep.
we are not missing anybody there.
All right, that's cool. That's cool. So it's going to be a live code along today. So if you have your system set up, if you have Node.js installed and npm ready to go, like a good web dev, then go ahead and head over to this GitHub link that Mr. Kai is going to put in the chat for you. And this is a link to our kind of workshops repository here at Kintone. And all of these kind of repositories are kind of like different beginners tutorials, or like showing off different kind of like integrations, or like things that use Kintone as a web database backend, right? And I keep saying like Kintone, Kintone, Kintone. And yes, I do work for Kintone. I am here to talk to you a little bit about it, but the content of today's workshop is not going to be 100% dependent on Kintone. So you could, for example, take what we're going to learn today and very easily apply it to other databases, very popular choices, right? Like Firebase, Supabase, or even a local database if you want to, right? I personally use Kintone. Yes, I do work, with Kintone, but also I like the product. It's very, very easy to use, and you'll kind of see as we live build this out. Like I have my own personal domain here, sean.kintone.com, right? And if you sign up today, you'll actually get your own Kintone subdomain, 100% free of charge, right? And I really do mean free, as in like we don't even ask for a credit card, or we don't sell your information or anything like that. I'll talk about that later. But yeah, we'll be saving our database information into a database here. So what we're going to be making today, if you go to this GitHub and you scroll down just a little bit, we kind of have like a GIF right here of kind of the completed project or what it's going to do. And you can see as I like desperately move my mouse around, what this app does is it has a very basic front end made in React. And I wanted to know where people are using Kintone from, for example, right? It's just an example app. And so you can pick the country, state, and city where you live, and then you click a submit button, and it saves that information to a web database, right? And saving information to databases is really important, right? For almost every web application, right? You usually want to be saving data to a database, getting data from a database. Maybe you can edit it a little bit in the database, right? So that's going to be what we're going to be building out today, if that sounds cool. So let's get started. We do have a limited amount of time. So go ahead and go to the code, and however you like to do it, whether it's in the CLI or GitHub desktop, go ahead and git clone our example repo. And the way that our repo is structured today is we have a front end and a back end. So we actually are going to be running two different web projects here in today's tutorial. So go ahead and change directories into that React and REST API workshop. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up in VS Code. If you like my theme for VS Code and you want to know what it is the purple theme. Everyone always asks. It's called Shades of Purple. It's the best theme that you can get. I highly recommend it. And taking a quick look at the structure of this starter app, because it's not completed yet. We're going to code it out together. But what we have here is a app, and we do have a very extensive README. If you want to read over this tutorial later, if you get lost, and actually hint, if you go in the docs folder, we have the solution to the workshop and also all the steps for this workshop, all written right here in Markdown. So it's actually you don't have to listen to me at all, right? But what we have is we have a standard source folder, right? Like so many React apps. And in our folder, we have components. We have a folder called requests. This is where we're going to be making our API calls to save to our database, right? And talk to our backend. We have app.js, right? Very standard React stuff. And what we've already set up for you this time. And if you go back to your terminal, and if you do a quick npm install right in the root folder, got to install those dependencies, right? And I do apologize if I'm going a little fast today. We only have a little bit of time. But if you do npm install to install those dependencies already, and then you do npm run start, it's going to start up our React front end. note that this is a backend and web database workshop. So the front end is mostly done, really. But it'll open up on localhost 3000. React always takes a while. And you can see our web app is here running, right? It's on localhost 3000. It says, I use Kintone, blah, 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 right? And you can pick your country, United States. You can pick a state. I choose Texas. Sure. Cowboys, Dallas, Texas. Sure. Unfortunately, though, because our app is not complete yet, if you click on the no, Siri. If you click on the developers tools and you open up the console and you click submit, it's going to say, it's going to die, right? So we need to code out basically how to send our information from our front end to our back end, and then from our back end into Kintone. So if that makes sense to everybody today, then we're going to get started. And one way that I like to start whenever I'm kind of doing these workshops or presenting to people is I like to encourage people to think like a programmer, right? And especially as you're learning web development and as you're learning programming, you're trying to get in the industry, right? You're kind of building cool projects in your GitHub and going through tutorials, yeah. And a very important skill is to be able to look at something that's made on the web and think about its structure and think about its database structure, right? Because really apps is all just data moving around, yeah. And how you show that data or how you save that data is what's important, right? So this is a very, very basic front end. And what we have here is country, state, and city. And so these are all going to be stored as strings. So if it was a database like a MySQL database or something like that you have locally running, you would need to make a new table, right? And then you have 3 columns in it, right? The 3 columns would be the country, the state, and the city. And those 3 columns would then have rows of data. So row number 1, America, and Texas and Dallas. And row number 2 is California, or America, California, San Francisco, something, right? So you're going to be storing string data into your database this time. We're going to be saving them as strings into our database. And I guess we can go ahead and get started by getting a Kintone license. And if you don't want to sign up today, that's totally okay. But I'll show you how easy it is to make a database. So if we could get Mr. Kai the link to kintone.dev/new in the chat. And if you click on that, it'll take you to this developer license registration form. And it has a lot of stuff in it, but to put it all down, basically, this is completely free. We don't charge you anything. We don't ask you for a credit card. It's not freemium. It's not like tiered pay either. So like there's no missing capabilities. There's no missing parts of it. It's the full Kintone experience. And also we don't sell your data. So like we're not like Facebook or other parties, right? We're not gonna like take your data and like sell it to advertisers or anything like that. We're just a Japanese company that has this cool product called Kintone, and we want people to hack on it. That's it, right? You do need a valid email in order to sign up, but that's only to prevent people from making 1,000 Kintone subdomains, right? So just please put in a valid email, and that's all for that. So if you put in, I'll put in Sean, last name's Luce. You can look me up on LinkedIn if you want. It's okay. And if you give us a little bit of information about your stuff, like, oh, I'm studying, we're a small team. It's only 3 of us right now. And so we actually look at all these and say like, oh, people seem to want more, like advanced topics or beginners topics or whatever, And if you first interested you in a Kintone developer's license, I guess it's a workshop today, or maybe other. If you say MLH, then maybe MLH would be happy about that. So definitely put that in and tell us kind of like what you want to use the developer's license for. And the last part is this. This is the hardest part: the Kintone developer license subdomain. So what a subdomain is, right? Earlier, I went to sean.kintone.com. And this is where I have all my databases for not only work, but also for my private. I do some freelance programming as well. I use Kintone in my personal life as well because it's so easy. That sean.kintone.com, that Sean part right there, that's what I put in right here. So if you were to say, like I love coding.kintone.com, you would put in I love coding, for example. Or if you were, a big soccer fan, you could put like, soccer is great, and that would give you a soccerisgreat.kintone.com subdomain, if that makes sense, right? If you put in Sean, it's already taken by me. I already got the good one. This subdomain is not available. And if you click sign up, then it's going to be the standard, sign up for a service kind of flow. So we're going to send you an email. You click on the email, like, get started link that's in the email.
Sure.
And
I would like to interrupt you a little bit. There is a question like,
yeah,
can
sure.
you repeat the terminal command on how to run the app again?
Oh, yeah, we'll do that. We're going to get back there. Don't worry.
Great.
The first thing that I want to do is I want to set up our database, right? Because
Mhm.
usually having your database, and this is kind of like when I make a new web project, and maybe you in the future as well, is we like to start out with the database and think about, okay, here's where I'm going to save this data, that data, make it, and then you build kind of your front end, and then you build your back end. So I was going in that order, but we will go over the terminal commands one more time. Anyways, the database part will actually be done in the next 5 minutes. So 5 more minutes. When you get to your Kintone portal, we're going to make our database. And this is why we promote Kintone to hackers and hackathons and people learning to code, because um, I could code out a MySQL database. I've done it before. It's not fun. It's not interesting. I could do it, and I don't want to. Right? I want to quickly get started. Databases are, unfortunately, they're not the most interesting part of your hackathon projects or your web development projects. Right? No one actually cares which database you use, unfortunately. And so I use a web database. I've used Firebase in the past. Superbase, great products. Kintone's very easy. So we're going to make a database right now. If you click on the plus sign in apps, you click on create app from scratch. And here we are. So this is going to be our MLH who uses Kintone database. I just gave it a name. And remember I said that we're saving 3 columns of strings, right? So we're saving 3 strings. So we're going to do drag and drop. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Go into the settings. Number 1 is going to be our country. And then that's the name just for our reference. In the field code, this is the really important part. In the field code, this is going to be what we're referencing in our code when we hit up our APIs, right? So we're going to do lowercase c country and do the same thing. State, uppercase S, field code, lowercase s state, save, and city, and lowercase c city. Save, activate your app, aka your database, and congratulations, you have just made a type safe database in less than 1 minute, as opposed to the hours that it would take to make a local one, or also the hour that it would take to set up Firebase, Superbase. And I could add in information if I want by hand: United States, Texas, Dallas. Sure, right? And then I have an entry in my database. Very cool. So now that we have that set up, let's go back into our code, and we're going to go back into the terminal, and we're going to kind of try and connect first our front end to our database and see what happens. Okay. So going back into the terminal, and we have, I'm going to move this over here real quick. We have here in the terminal, whenever you get a new web project, and this is just general like JavaScript node advice, you can always take a look at the package.json file. And your package.json is going to tell you what kind of dependencies, extra packages that you have installed. So here you can see we have React installed, right? And for our front end, I did this country, state, city package, for example. Also, if you ever want to know how to start a web project that you cloned off GitHub, right? And maybe their documentation isn't so good, or maybe they talk too fast, like I just did, right? You can always take a look at the scripts part, and the scripts will be like npm run blah blah blah. So npm run start, npm run build, and you can see here that if we root npm run start, that's going to run React script start for us. And so the commands in order to start this project, first you're going to do npm install, right? Whenever you see a package.json, you want to npm install, in order to get those dependencies. downloaded. And then the other thing you're going to do is npm run start. That's all you need to do to get this front end up and running, right? But we do have a problem, right? So if we go into our front end, you remember it had a big error, right on the screen as when we tried to post to our database, right? And that's also because the project is not finished, but it also needs to have a backend in order to save into the web database. And this is a very, very common um, kind of like web development, I'd say, structure, right? You don't have your front end making API calls. You're going to run into a lot of trouble by processing. If you have to process a lot of data, it's going to be very, very slow. And also because of CORS errors, right? And if you've never heard of CORS errors, you know, what is CORS? And they'll tell you basically, but what CORS is a security protocol in a web development that basically tells that you are trying to get information from a different web domain than the one that you're currently on. It's not secure. Someone could go in the middle in there and like inject their own like malicious data, or they could steal your data, right? And so you have CORS errors when you make API requests, when you're getting data from databases, or when you're calling APIs, or when you're saving data, for example. You always want to do it from a backend, and that's because of CORS errors, but that's also just best practice for processing large amounts of data, right? You don't want React to also be like trying to parse a big list of countries, states, and cities, for example, right? Um, so what we're going to do is, if you go back into the code, you can see that we have this backend folder, right? In this backend folder, if you open that up, you will actually see another package.json and a file called server.js. So what we're going to be actually doing today in this specific workshop is we're going to be npm run starting twice at the same time. And we're going to be running on localhost 3000 our React app. And then we're going to be running in a different port our backend. And our React app is going to ask our backend, hey, I have some data for you to save. Please do that. Then the backend is going to hit up our database, our web database, which this time it's Kintone. Could be anything else. All you have to do is change the API call. And then the backend is going to say, hey, Kintone, save this data for me, or hey, give me this data. Then the backend is going to say, hey, front end, React, I got this data. All right, React will show it. So what you need to do is keep this tab in your terminal running on localhost 3000. Keep that running. And in a new tab, or in a different shell window, I like tabs, but you can do a different window if you want. Change directories into the backend folder. And you'll see that we're now in our backend folder. So it's this one right here. And run npm install one more time. Every time you see a new package.json, you have to npm install. It's just the rules, right? And then in this backend, you can see that we have two scripts as well. We have test, which actually there are no tests because I didn't make any tests for this workshop. It's out of the scope. And then we have start, which runs our server.js. So this server.js file is where we're going to be coding out our backends together, all right? So if you want to look along with me in the server.js file, I'll go over the code just a little bit. But we're going to be actually filling out some parts, so it's not done yet, but I do have some boilerplate ready for you using express.js. And this express.js, this is all taken from their official documentation here on express.js. I went to the getting started and the routing guide. And basically how you make a new backend route is you do app, if you call it app dot method, so get, post, right, delete, put, update, and then you do the path and then what it's going to do. So you can see an example right here, a get route on our backend, which is supposed to get data, right? That's what the HTML protocol does. is going to be a get route, and when someone comes onto this get route on the slash, it's going to send them back hello world, for example, right? Or a post route. So if someone wants to save some information, instead of response res.send, you could do, okay, go hit up this API and save some data. So this is all from their documentation. And what we've done is we have our packages, our imports right here. And it's going to be, Express. We're going to do some core stuff. We're running on port 50,000 this time. And then we've called our Express class, we're calling it app right here. So everything's going to be, for example, app.get, for example, or app.post, right? But our backend needs to know where to save our data to, right? We haven't told our code like, hey, this is the database you need to save to, right? And so we need 3 pieces of information from Kintone in order to connect them. That's all. We need our subdomain, and it's coming from our .env file. So if you're just getting started coding, .env contains all of your super secret API tokens and valuable information that you don't want other people to see, right? So we're going to need to make a .env file that has a subdomain, an app ID, and our API token. Okay. Here is a .env.example file in the root folder. And if you are just getting started coding and you are kind of like making projects and you want people to check them out on GitHub, if you have a .env.example file, I will think that you are very cool and a lot more advanced than someone who doesn't. I've had people that interview for jobs and I have no idea how to set up their GitHub projects, right? Even though they're showing them to me. And so a .env.example file will tell people that you need some information, but without telling them the actual information. So like this is a fake API token, right? So we're going to need to make a .env file. So go ahead and copy this file and then rename it to just .env. Close that. And so we need our subdomain, we need our app ID, and we need an API token. So we can get the first 2 very, very easily, especially if you're following along in Kintone. I just made this app or this database called MLH who uses Kintone. And in the URL, I'll post this down here, you can see my subdomain this time is going to be just Sean. It's sean.kintone.com, so my subdomain is going to be Sean. And our app ID, this is basically which database are you saving to, right? So, and you can get that from the URL. We have a /83. This is my 83rd database, or my 83rd app. There is no limit. As many as you want. Just don't spam them, right? And so our app ID this time for me, it's going to be 83. For you, if you're following along for the first time using Kintone, it's probably going to be 1, right? This is your first database ever. And the last thing that we need is our API token. So how do you get an API token with Kintone? Also very, very easy. You don't have to program it out like you would with other backends. If you go into this cogwheel for your database or your app that you made, go to app settings right here. And don't worry if I'm going too fast. This is a recording, right? There will be a recording, so you can definitely check it out later. Go to API token, and we're going to make a new API token. So I click on generate, and there's my API token. And remember that we're going to be saving information to our database, right? So we need to give it a scope or scoped permissions. So you need to click this add records checkbox as well. So we're going to be viewing records and adding records today. Go ahead and copy the API token real quick and then click save. And this is very important. After clicking save, it says changes not applied. You have to always update your app. Never forget to update the app. I always do. And go ahead and take the API token that you copied and paste it into your .env file. That's going to be everything that you need. Do not worry, I will be changing this API token after our workshop is done today. But that being said, it's a scoped API token with a type-safe database, right? So it's not like you could really do any damage anyways. You know, so Kintone makes it really, really easy. We actually set up a type-safe database. You can't put numbers in the string columns, for example. It has a scoped permission API token, right? These are very, very advanced things that you can do very, very easily. And that's really, really nice with Kintone. That's why I use it in my personal projects as well. Alrighty. So now that you have those in your .env file, we are actually ready to start coding out our backend. So we're going to be, we have a little bit more boilerplate here, but we have 2 record endpoints that we prepared for you today. And this is also just taken from our Kintone.dev, our API documentation. And if you go in here to REST API, I want to get some info. I want to get some records. Actually, I want to add a record, right? I want to add to my database where people, live. This is just from our documentation right here, right? And so the endpoint, it'll tell you like subdomain.kintone.com v1 record.json, for example, right? So on and so forth. So that's where we got these from. And we have a multiple records endpoint that's going to be able to get and save multiple records, although we're going to be using it just for get this time because we want to get a big list of where everyone's using our app from. And then the single record endpoint is going to be used for our post requests, right? We're going to save one user at a time, country, state, and city. So we're going to use a single record endpoint, which the only difference really is this records with an S or record with no S. All right. So looking at our code along today, we're going to create a new route with express.js. All right. So the way that we did that, we designated our express class. We instanced the class as app. So we're going to do that. App dot, and just like their documentation, we look up here, app dot get for a get route. Okay. App dot get. And then within that app dot get, we can set up some information about how to configure our routes. We can do a little bit, but the first thing that we need to do is tell it which route we're going to be doing things on, right? So which route is our backend going to take get requests and post requests on? And the way that I've set it up in the front end this time, you can change this if you want to, but you have to change everything. If you go to the React front end, source folder /requests, you can see we have get records and post record.js. And this is where our request from our front end to our backend is going to go. Remember, that's not from our front end to a web database. That is from our front end to our backend. You can see that our endpoint is localhost 50,000 /get data. That's where our front end is going to say like, hey, you got any countries, states, and cities for me to show, right? And so that's where we're going to create that new route on our express.js.backend. So it's going to be called get data. I do forget if I need to put a slash in there real quick. So let me take a look at what I wrote personally in our workshop steps. It's going to be /get data. So I'm just going to put that in there. Good web devs don't memorize anything, right? And another thing that we can do is we can tell our backend how to handle cores, right? Because we need to get around these cross-origin resource sharing errors, right? They are always in our way, and they are frustrating to deal with. I've had to deal with cores many, many times. This is in cores, errors is a common thing. It's not just like a Kintone thing. This is common. And I think if you were trying to hit up like a Firebase or Supabase database as well, it'd be the same thing. You got to deal with cores. So our cores, actually, we have our cores options right up here. And it's saying like, where are we accepting requests from? And that requests, localhost 3000 is an okay place. Trust it for data requests. And remember that our React app is currently running on localhost 3000, right? So that's kind of cool. It's starting to make sense a little bit, right? So I've already configured the cores options up above in the boilerplate. So this is called cores. This is going to be for our cores options right up there. The next thing is the remainder of a express backend is actually it's a function, really. If you can look at this, if you're studying JavaScript and you're just getting used to it, you might recognize this fat arrow, right, pointing to a curly bracket. And that's what backend routes really are. When someone goes to slash get data, I want you to do blah blah blah, right? So I could go ahead and do like a fat arrow right here and some curly brackets, but I need to tell it it's a function. And so this is going to be where Express does something a little bit weird. And if you can catch this just by looking at this, I'll give everyone 20 seconds. If you can catch what's a little bit weird about this route, that I want you to know. See if you can spot it. We're at app.get slash, and this is from Express's documentation. It's a little bit different from a function. What's different about this, if you'll notice in our function parameters, right, what data the function takes in, they have request and response. But normally when you write a function, you don't put your response in the inputs to the function, right? Functions take in information, change it around a little bit, do some stuff, and then they spit back out some information, right? In express.js, the way that they've set this up is you need to include this res, this response, in the inputs of your function. It is a little bit weird, in my opinion, but that's the way they did things. And so I'm not going to argue with their documentation. So we need to have our request and our response. We're going to do rec res. All right. It's going to be rec res, and I forgot to mark it as async. So I'm going to do that right here. Async, because we don't want our function to immediately resolve, right? We're going to be getting data from a far, far away web database, right? So we don't want it to be ending immediately. So we have our request and our response. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're doing a get route. So we want to get multiple records. And this is just going to be a normal API call. So when someone says, hey, give me the data, we're going to make a normal fetch request, basically, right, to our backend or to our web database. So I'm going to copy this real quick. So again, this is stuff that I wrote it all out and I don't memorize it, right? But everything that we're doing right now is standard web dev practice. It's not specific to Kintone at all, except for this part, which I'll talk about. So we're going to make a fetch request, right? And making a fetch request to get data from someplace, get data from an API. So we need to have some fetch options, right? So we need to tell like what kind of request it is. So it's going to be a get request, right? We want to get some data from a database. And then Kintone, they want you to tell them your API token in a special way in the headers of your request. And for Firebase or Supabase or any kind of authentication database, right, you need to tell them your API token or secret passcode somewhere, right? So for Kintone, it's going to be right here. In the headers, you need to put X Saibo's API token with capital letters, and that's going to be equal to our API token. And then everything after that is going to be a normal fetch request. So we can make going to get a response, and that response is going to be equal to the results of a fetch request. We're going to be fetching from our multiple records endpoint, and our fetch request is going to have these options. Right, and this is just very, very basic. This is modern. Some people might still be using Axios or other, API call stuff, but this is just what we do there. We're going to await it as well, right? Because we did mark it as an async function. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get a response back. And if we look at some documentation, when we get some records and stuff like that, right, it's going to come back as this JSON object, right? And usually when you're working with APIs and backends, right, it's going to be in JSON. So if we go back right here, we're going to need to handle this JSON, basically, right? And so we're going to call const our JSON response is equal to, once again, await, because we're going to be doing some data manipulation. It's going to be equal to response.json. There we go. And the last thing that we're going to do is return JSON response. And here we have made our GET request. And so actually, if you're following along with me right now, in your terminal, if you have the React app running on localhost 3000, then you're in the backend folder. We're in the backend folder of our project right here. And if you do npm run start, you can see that we're listening at localhost 50,000. And so check to see if localhost 50,000 / get data is working. Okay, I'll do that. And you can see in our app, if I reload our app and let's say I click get, it's going to spin around a little bit. You better work. Double check that real quick. It could just be going really slow. Do that again. Get. And we'll have time for debugging after this as well. It's always when you're doing a live performance that debugging doesn't work out, right? Let me just double check that right there. Yep. Post 50,000. My app.js as well. Localhost 50,000 / get data. I'm going to do that right there just to be sure. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I apologize about that. What we need to do is I was treating this like a normal function. I forgot almost that I was using React. I get it now. The express way of returning data is you don't use a return statement. And this is kind of what I was saying earlier about how it's so strange that we have this response input in our express, and it still gets me to this day. In order to return data, you need to do response dot something, right? Instead of just doing a normal return statement like a normal function would do, right? So what we need to do actually is we need to do in the express land, what we need to do is response. So we've declared response up here. Response.json is equal to our JSON that we created from our app. So I apologize about that. And if we restart our backend, npm run start one more time. There we go. I got a little bit ahead of myself, but this will work. If we do get, and you can see, hey, United States, Texas, Dallas. I didn't type that in. That came from my Kintone database. Very cool, right? So we can do the post request real quick in the next 5 minutes, and then we will have a completed app. And then I will take some questions. We can do some debugging, and I can talk to you about not just web development databases, but also the career stuff as well. If you're looking to break into the industry, and my story about how I did it and how you can do it too, I'm always very, very happy to talk about that stuff. So our post request is going to be the same, almost exactly, right? We're going to be doing app.post, and this time our post request from our post record.json or from our JavaScript file is at the post data route. And that's what I decided to name it. You didn't have to name it that. So we're going to do /post data, comma. It's the first thing you do with Express backends, right? Is you tell it what route are we making. We're also going to do CORS because we don't want to run any CORS options because it is our React front end that's asking for data. Mark it as an async function, just like last time, with a request and a response. And then what is our function going to do? So we put a big fat arrow and some curly brackets. And since this is a post request, we need to tell our app like what data we need to save into our database, right? And Kintone also will say like, hey, you need to save data in any database, really. We'll say like, hey, you need to save data in this kind of specific format, right? So if we have like this app body, and I did write it a certain way in the project, so I'm going to follow those steps exactly. But we need to have a request body, right? So I'm going to copy that real quick and post that right here. And the way that this is formatted, it's formatted as a JSON object. You can see that we've created request bodies equal to a JSON object. So we have our app and an app ID, right? Which database am I saving this information to? Okay, what's that database's record information? It's going to have one field called country, and that field of country is going to have a value of request.body of country. Same thing for state. We're going to have a field in our database, a column in our database called state. It's going to have a value of request.body.state. And the last thing for city as well, right? And every web kind of like API is going to have some kind of like way that they want you to send your data, right? And you always have to check documentation in order to know how they want that exactly, right? So the next thing that we need to do, now that we have our request body all set up, is we are going to then basically put that body into our fetch options, right? And this is a big difference between get requests. We made a get request up here, right? And we didn't mean to like say like what information we're going to get, right? We're just getting information. And so we put that information for a post request, usually in your headers or your options, right? And so you can see that this time our fetch options or our options, the method is going to be post, right? We're going to be saving some data into our database. And we have our usual header of our API token. It's going to be like that for almost every web application. Our content type, this is going to be more boilerplate, saying like, hey, I'm sending you JSON, just so you know. And the last thing that you're going to see is a body field. This is very, very common in post requests, right? Body is equal to a JSON stringified version of our request body that we put up right here, okay? And if you want to add to your Kintone app later, then you would just add more fields here. Like maybe you had like a phone number or something, you know, and then you could have a phone number field and you would format the data like this and give it a value, blah, 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 right? So now that we have our options, one more time, our response is going to be equal to the results of awaiting a fetch request. This time we're only going to be saving one record at a time, right? One user's city, country, state, and city. So we're going to be doing a single record endpoint. So single record endpoint, and our options are going to be equal to our options. That response is actually going to send us back some kind of OK response, you know. So we're going to say OK, our JSON response once again is equal to await response.json. Very, very common pattern in web development here. And then lastly, this is the express thing one more time. We're going to be sending back a response here. And the format of it's going to be JSON, and it's going to be equal to our JSON response. Go ahead and restart your server, restart your backend. You don't need to restart your front end. Do npm run start. Go back to your React app, and we are going to pick a country. So this time I'll do the United States again, or I'll do Japan because I'm in Japan right now. And I'm in Tokyo. And I'll just say that I'm in the Kita area of Tokyo. And if I click submit, it's going to spin around. I didn't code in any feedback if it saves correctly, but if we go to our database and refresh our Kintone database, you will see that we have saved information into our database. Right now we have Japan, Tokyo, and Kita saved into our database, just like that. So that is the end of our live coding part. And I admit it was a little bit rushed, but I'm very, very happy to answer questions. And the recording of this is going to be available on your Discord, as well as on our YouTube channel. If Mr. Kai, you could please post a link to our YouTube channel.
Already posted.
That's great. Thank you. We have all these different videos of different technologies using like React, or my favorite, Svelte, way cooler than React, right? 3.js, for example, and saving them into Kintone databases, yes, but it's a good place, I think, to learn, kind of get used to like front-end development and handling data and stuff like that. We also do live streams once every month-ish, month and a half or so. And our next one coming up is going to be about e-commerce. And we're going to code together a e-commerce front end and back end. And these are 2 hours long, so the pace is a little bit slower than we had today. And I can also see the chat. There's a lot more people in chat. Sometimes there's like 100 people, and it gets pretty wild in there. But it's very fun, in my opinion. All right.
Awesome. So maybe you all can add your question to the chats. We will get back to the chats now. All the questions.
Yeah.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, sorry, I
Uh,
accidentally clicked leave studio instead of my screen.
yeah, no worries. We have some questions here in the chats.
Yeah.
So first is can frontend connect to Kintone database directly without a backend server?
No, it cannot. And this is, Kintone is, we try to, keep and protect the cores, right, methodology of web development. And you're going to see that not only Kintone, but a lot of different web databases, they will not allow you to just in your React or Svelte front end say like, hey, give me data or save this data. It's very, very common. So hopefully that answers your
Okay.
question.
So
Yeah.
uh, uh,
I can only
uh,
see one comment because
so
I left the room on accident, but I also understand. Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. So hello, MLH community and audience attendees. How are you? How's the session
Yeah.
going? What
So
are you doing?
the next question is: am I audible, by the way?
What's that?
Because I can see maybe.
Should I do this question on the screen or should I do the one in chat, Mr. Wecodes?
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you
Oh, really?
clearly. Just a second.
Oh, everyone says that I'm audible. Am I audible, chat? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you are audible.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, maybe I'm missing the connection. Maybe.
Yeah, okay,
Uh,
well, that's fine. Thank you, everyone, for letting me know. I appreciate that. +1, yeah. Thank you, Tintin. Um, so let's see. So starting from WeCodes, thank you for your question. How does Kintone database integrate with other services with Kintone? So Kintone is 100% JavaScript customizable. So anything that you could do in JavaScript, right, you can do in Kintone. So actually, if I will show you this dev2 post from one of my friends, but let's post this in. I guess I can present it. Yeah, I'm gonna share a screen one more time. I can't type in the chat, so let me just share my whole screen again. Can you see my screen? Okay,
yeah, I can just add it here. Yes.
great. Here is my coworker put this like game. He made a game in Phaser JS, and this is running in Kintone as well. So you can see right here, um, anything that you can do in JavaScript, like you can do in Kintone, right? Because it's just JavaScript customizable. In addition, also we do a lot of iPaaS stuff. Have you ever heard of Make.com or like Zapier or anything like that? Right. So Make makes it really, really easy, and we have a full integration with Make and Zapier and stuff like that, where like you can do webhooks, right? And you can say like, hey, when I get an email in Gmail, save the content of that email to my database, for example, and it does it all with like no code, right? And I know that a lot of you are kind of starting out, and you're saying like, no code. I want to code. I want to learn how to do stuff, right? Um, Having been in the industry for 5 years, I appreciate no code from time to time, right? Yeah. So hopefully that answers your question. Is fully JavaScript enabled, and also we do a lot of iPads. Skitty 24. I joined late, so I was missing the context. Hey, but I'm glad that you came anyways, and we will have the um, recording of this available in the Discord, and also I have a recording of this content actually on our YouTube channel as well, and it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more, how would I say, like concise and edited down for brevity. So I'm going to post that in the private chat, and then Mr. Kai, if you could please put that in the uh, chat for me, I would appreciate that.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. I will just send that here. Uh, Apart from that, I guess I lost the chat when I reloaded the window. So,
Yeah,
did you
yeah.
answer the MVC and architecture question? Design architecture?
Um, yeah, I don't see that comment. So if you could, I lost it too. So if you posted a question that I didn't answer, please post it again.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So, the
yeah.
question is, what is the design architecture adapted for this demo project? Like MVC,
Okay.
MVVM, like
Yeah.
which one was there?
MVC. Yeah, so MVC, that's a I haven't heard that one in a while. I used to do Ruby and Ruby on Rails development back in the day, right? Because
Mhm.
Ruby was made in Japan as well. Um, and so we don't really have like a data model, right? We have a view, right? That's the V of the MVC, right? We have our React front end, but we don't have necessarily like a data model that we're working with, or we don't have our data controller is our backend in Express.js, right? So it doesn't quite follow MVC. It's more like just V and C right now. But if you are making a bigger app, you could definitely make like a model file. For example, like what is a Kintone record? What is a user's city, country, state, right? And then you would make that model and then send that to your controller, right? Whatever that is. In this case, it was our Express.js backend, and then it would display that in the view.